Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's FSR online debate. The topic of today is flexibility and market integration to improve energy affordability and EU competitiveness. So we have a quite ambitious target today, and we will discuss many perspectives on how to achieve this double target. My name is Ilaria Conti, and I'm the host of today's debate together with my colleague and Deputy Director of the Florence School of Regulation, Alberto Potocznik. Alberto will introduce today's topic and also the first speakers for the opening session. And then in the second part of today's debate, we will have a panel debate that I will moderate. Just some housekeeping rules, as usual, for those who are not familiar with our online debates. Interaction and questions are very welcome. Please don't hesitate to use the Q&A box that you see here underneath our speaking heads. And in the second part of the debate, we will pose some of these questions to the panelists. So this said, I give the floor to Alberto for the introduction. Alberto, I think you are muted. Yes.
Better? Yes, good afternoon, and welcome also from my side to our speakers and panelists and to all those who are following us online. Yes, indeed, as Ilaria mentioned, is quite a wide topic. Affordability is about the cost of energy for households, commercial and industries. It's a matter of many items in the bill, and all items in the bill should be given attention. Many of these items will be affected by the greater integration of renewables into the electricity systems. And maybe the focus today will be on how we can help this integration and reduce the cost, the system cost of integrating a greater share of renewables. And there are a number of dimensions on which we can operate to try to facilitate this integration. The first one is the physical integration of the energy market across the European Union. As most of you know, the Clean Energy Package introduced a 70% target for the share of cross-border capacity, cross-zonal capacity to be allocated to the market. We are not yet there. There was a flexibility period, which is ending this year, and on many borders, we are still far from 70%. So that's an area which probably deserves attention. There are also delays in the development of the terms and conditions or methodologies for the implementation of the guidelines in the electricity sector. ACER's estimated last year that around 27% of them are late. Some of them are late by years. So again, by delaying the full implementation of the internal electricity market, might go against the integration of renewables. There is still probably some room for improving the way in which balancing markets operate with the different types of reserves and the way in which the European platforms work. Flexibility can also be achieved by making the network smarter. We still have to find out whether these should be mandated or there should be promotions through a regulatory approach. There seems to be still some barriers to the participation of decentralized resources and storage to the markets. And so the question is how these barriers could be overcome. Finally, beyond the regulatory barriers, there seems to also to be a behavioral aspect, especially when it comes to involving residential customers in providing flexibility. Explicit or implicit demand response will play a major role in providing flexibility, but still many customers are not yet engaged in this, are not involved in providing demand response. And I think there is a behavioral aspect there. It's not a matter of regulation any longer. Probably regulation allows them to, through aggregation, for example, but there is an attitude of energy consumers towards being involved. And that is something that's probably more difficult than the more technical aspects. So I think there are many dimensions, and I'm sure we will touch most of them today. We do not have the ambition of solving all these issues or even discuss them exhaustively. But by kicking the ball around, I think we can contribute to try to find solutions. So I think at least identifying and pin down on the most important issues. So I don't have much more to say at this stage, and I'm really pleased and grateful for Christos Kolokatis. He is the team leader, Flexibility Energy System Needs at Acer, who has joined us. So I'm very pleased to give him the screen for the opening presentations for today's debate. Christos, the screen is yours.
Thanks. Many thanks, Alberto, and many thanks for the invitation, and good afternoon to everyone. Let me share my screen and ensure that you guys can see it fine.
Yeah, we can see it fine.
You can see it fine.
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Christos Kolokathis. I'm the team leader of a recently formed team within Acer, the Flexibility and Resilience team, which sits in the Energy System Needs department of the organization. Now, over the next 10 minutes, I'll go through some of the challenges that we're seeing in the market when it comes to flexibility, followed by some of the solutions, either on the technical side or more on the policy side, let's say that we can see or that we are proposing as Acer. And I will close with something slightly different, which is a new element in the electricity market design reforms and the so-called flexibility needs assessments. So starting with the challenge that we are seeing in the market, I think it's very evident, that there is a greater need for flexibility in the market. Particularly over the last couple of years, we can see it, let's say, very prominently. And what we see on this slide is on the left-hand side, the number of hours and days with low or negative prices, so prices below 5 euros per megawatt hour. And on the right-hand side, the number of days that the swing between the days, so the price differential of prices, of day-ahead prices, is greater than 50 euros per megawatt hour. And what we can take away from these graphs is that we are seeing an increasing number of, let's say, very low prices and negative prices. As of last year, this accounted for around 9% of the hours within a year, starting from close to zero earlier in the decade. And at the same time, we also see that price differentials are very persistent. So 70% of the hours in a year have a price differential over 50 euros per megawatt hour. And this is despite the fact that prices have come down from the very, let's say, the extreme levels that we see during the energy crisis. So all in all, I think it's very evident that there is this need for flexibility in the market, and we can also expect that this phenomenon will be exacerbated as we're deploying more variable renewables in the system, and if we are not going to do something to address it. Now moving more on the solutions part, I think from a technical perspective, there are different technologies, solutions that can provide the necessary attributes to the system for different market timeframes. So we have more established technologies like traditional thermal generation units and electricity networks or interconnectors that can help, let's say, to address flexibility across time and space. And then we have, let's say, more emerging or relatively established new technologies like demand-side response and batteries that are increasingly prominent in our power systems and can generally address, let's say, needs across shorter time frames. So, for example, in jurisdictions like California or Texas or Australia, we see a great chunk of the needs, let's say, be it ramping needs or flexing across the day, so meeting peak loads met by these kind of newer resources. And then we also have another, let's say, bigger chunk of technologies that are more novel in many cases, like thermal storage or hydrogen, for example, that can play a role to meet different needs across different time frames, but that are in a more, let's say, developed states at the moment. Now, what we also experience is that leveraging the flexibility that is available on the distributed level, so be it renewables on the distributed level or battery storage, electric vehicles, can be a very important part of the solution to manage grid congestions and price fluctuations. And given the prices that we see and let's say the revenues that different technologies receive from the market, we expect that there is a great, let's say, scope for these technologies to be deployed. Now moving more to the policy side of things, Alberto already alluded, there are many different, let's say, solutions, tools that more policymakers have available. This can vary from, enhanced wholesale market design, further market integration, more appropriate pricing signals towards consumers, support schemes, etc., etc. But what I will focus here is a list of, let's say, actions that we proposed as Acer earlier in the year to unlock a great share of this flexibility. And I won't go through every action on this slide. That would be a bit cumbersome, perhaps, but I will try to group them in three broad categories. The first one being that of removing barriers to non-fossil flexible resources and ensuring that the legislative framework is available to recognize these resources. So we are still seeing, let's say, significant barriers for demand-side response and other resources, while in many cases, new resources are either not recognized or the responsibilities are not clear. And on top of that, we can also see that in cases, the more detailed rules, let's say, for market participation of these resources can be prohibitive for them to effectively participate in the markets. So this is the first category. The second category is about investing smartly. And this means, for example, let's say deploying smart technology, being smart meters or other types of automated technology that, if combined with appropriate pricing signals, can unlock, we expect, a significant share of the flexibility, particularly from the demand side. What is also important here to note is that there is also scope to make regulation smarter. So, for example, to move from, let's say, the capex bias that often system operators are subject to a more TOTEX kind of approach. The third category that I already alluded to is that of price signals towards consumer. And again, here we think that there is significant scope to send more appropriate, more cost-reflective price signals to all types of consumers. And this relates both to the energy component of the system, of the bill, but also to the network component of the bill. So if, for example, looking at the energy part of the bill, what we see is that around 70% of more of consumers are on fixed price signals of some sort, meaning that they receive no signal, no incentive whatsoever to adopt their behavior to benefit the system as a whole. On the network side, we also see that, let's say, flat grid tariffs are not necessarily prominent, but are existent. But we also have some, let's say, more positive examples of time of use tariffs, mainly on the distribution side and less so on the transmission side, that can signal to consumers when it's best for the system to use the grid. So this was more about the challenges and the potential solutions to address flexibility. Now we'll come to the new element that was introduced by the electricity market design reforms, and I will speak a little bit about the so-called flexibility needs assessments. So in the context of the reform that the Commission, Member States and the Council undertook about a year or two ago, there was a general acknowledgement that while renewables are, let's say, the deployment of renewables is advancing quite quickly, we do not see a parallel, a commensurate development in terms of storage with the effects that we have seen previously in the market. So to address these, the member states, the institutions have decided to set up a new framework so that member states look into that aspect in more detail. And what we mean by that is that national authorities will have to undertake the so-called flexibility needs assessments. Now, perhaps going a little bit through the process, the first step is the establishment of the methodology on how to assess flexibility needs. And currently, let's say we are at the stage that system operators have made a proposal on how to do that, and ACER and NRAs will come a decision on this topic in July, within the next month. Following the establishment of this methodology, member states have a year to perform their assessments and to estimate, let's say, what kind of gaps do they have in the market. Following this, member states can, let's say, depict, represent this kind of flexibility needs, the objectives they have in their national energy and climate plans. And if necessary, they can also establish support schemes for non-fossil flexibility. So, for example, for storage and demand-side response. In addition to that, on top of that, member states will submit these national assessments to ACER, and we will be doing on our side a European-wide assessment to calculate needs for the Union as a whole. In parallel to all of that, there will also be a work stream on the barriers. So member states will have to identify what barriers exist in their markets and how to address these barriers, how to remove them for the market to increase the uptake of non-fossil flexible resources. Now, these flexibility needs assessments are not going to happen in a vacuum, of course, but they are going to, they will be, let's say, in the context of a host of different assessments So we have on the one side flexibility and needs assessments that deal more with renewables integration. We have the resource adequacy assessments be it the European resource adequacy assessment or national ones that look more into the question, will the lights stay on in the next 5 years? Of course, we have the network development plans looking into congestions and what kind of network developments are needed. And finally, there are also the member states, national energy and climate plans that set policy targets for renewables, for energy efficiency, and other elements of the power system. And what is important to note here is that it would be essential that, let's say, all these assessments are aligned and consistent between them, but at the same time that we avoid to overlap of work and application of work. And perhaps to elaborate a little bit on this, using the adequacy and flexibility assessments as an example, they both have their purpose and metrics, which are different. So, for example, in the ERA and the National Resource Adequacy Assessments, the goal is to identify if there are any gaps to meet the reliability standards, given specific metrics, while in the flexibility assessments, the main goal is to identify whether we have the necessary resources to meet the renewables integration targets. And so here we will be looking more into what are the goals of the governments? Are these being met based on the expected resources in the market? What kind of issues might arise when it comes, let's say, to ramping needs in the system when when the sun rises in the morning or it sets in the evening? Can the system deal with these kind of challenges? So they are complementary, but not the same. And I think I will stop at that and hand back to Alberto for the debate. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Christos. I think you covered more than one perspective when it comes to sort of flexibility and how we can try to address this at the least cost to try to make sure that we have affordable energy. So I think this would be provided an excellent background for the discussion to come in the panel. So I now pass the screen to Ilaria to moderate the panel.
Thank you very much indeed. Interesting food for thought from this introductory presentation. So we are now going to listen to our panelists. I will introduce them to you. So we have Nicola Rega, Executive Director of Climate Change and Energy of CEFIC, which is the EU Chemical Industry Council. Then we have George Visan, Vice Chair of the Core Steering Committee of ENTSO-E, the European Network of Transmission System Operators for Electricity. Guro Gröterud, Markets and Network Committee Chair of Smart10. Laurens Rutten, Senior Energy Policy Officer of BEUC, representing consumers. Dylan McConnell, Senior Research Associate from UNSW, which is the University of New South Wales, Australia. So we have also the luxury of having I would say, not usual perspective adding to this debate. So we're really very happy to have each and all of these panelists with us today. In this order, I would ask you to give some introductory remarks, commenting perhaps on the input coming from Christos, and we would try to stick to 5 minutes each for this first round. Starting with Nicola, please.
Thank you very much, Ilaria, and good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. In my 5 minutes, maybe just starting with a very hint on the chemical industry, which is the largest industrial energy consumer in Europe. We are consuming nowadays something like 165 terawatt hours of electricity, and that number can be potentially going up by 3 to 4 times, depending on the decarbonization pattern that is ahead of us and whether electricity becomes one of the options to decarbonize. So the chemical industry is also very diversified sector. It's a very heterogeneous sector with 30,000 companies in Europe. So I would say that probably the comment I'm going to make for our sector most likely also resemble many other views that are also from the industry side, from energy intensive industry sides. We are exposed to international competition, so we are extremely sensitive to energy prices. And that's why I think this debate is extremely important, because we are now discussing how to reduce overall energy costs. So at the end, the bill should go down for end users. Now, 3 points from my side. The first is on the flexibility as an enabler, not a substitute. What I mean is that industrial processes are extremely diversified across industries. There are some technical and economic constraints when we talk about flexibility, and there is no one size fits all, and that applies within a sector, let alone across sectors. So there is many industrial processes are designed to be base load, and it cannot be changed, not at least with current technologies. So they should not be penalized by their nature. So the flexibility needs to be a service, a tool that comes on top of the current regulation, should not discriminate for the ones that are not in a position to do so. So it should be an incentive, a voluntary system, which is also fairly remunerated. And that is also by doing so also I say that we need to be able to at the same time to allow for industrial users to play their role in flexibility. So removing barriers, and Christos was mentioning many of them. I think we fully subscribe to the analysis. There is a lot that needs to be done to bring also the demand side on pair with the supply side when it comes to flexibility, and then we need to allow the market to choose the most effective way of doing so. Secondly, we are looking at new solutions for, let's say, on-site flexibility, whereby we're not talking about flexing the production processes, but basically to adding components that will allow us to be more flexible on the demand side. And I'm talking about industrial batteries or power to X solutions, which basically allows the flexibility to be done, allow me the expression, at the gate, but then allow for the industrial process to continue as traditionally done. That is, it starts becoming potentially interesting, but again, we are talking about quite substantial capex investments that needs to be supported, because industry doesn't do it for the sake of its own production, but it does as a service to the network, so it needs to be remunerated in that respect. But also, it's a quite a risky business, so we need to develop solutions to de-risk the investments, especially if you're talking about linking them to variation of electricity from renewables in the market. If we don't know what's going to be the use of this solution for the next 15 years, it's difficult to build a business case appropriate. So we need some de-risking investments there. My last and final point goes on the cross-border integration and grid planning. Alberto was mentioning already in the introductory remarks, and Christos confirmed the 70% interconnection capacity target. It's a must. So if you're talking about, I would say, if you're serious about addressing the energy crisis and reduce energy cost, these are solutions which come at zero cost. We need to do them. We need to increase benefits for end consumers. So there is absolutely no political justification for delaying on that part. Just to add on that when we talk about grid planning, let's not forget that if you want to involve the demand side, particularly in the view of electrification, the grid connection at the demand side is also quite important. And that I'm saying because if you want to ramp up electricity consumption, we also have constraints at let's say the last mile or the last interconnection. Nowadays, we keep on receiving comments that from our members that the approval procedure is now reaching the 8 to 10 years for new capacity. So that also needs to be addressed. Otherwise, we are risking to discuss only on infrastructure on the supply side, but then we will find out that the demand side cannot cope with it. That's all from my side. Happy to engage later. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you, Nicola, and also thanks for sticking to the envisaged time. So we move now to our next speaker, who is George. Please.
Hi, hello, thank you. And let me tell you, I will appeal to your more to your auditory attention. Related with Christos, what Christos' presentation was, I think I was impressed about the idea of thinking outside the wires, so non-wire solutions as alternative to grid investments. But because I have to convey the message from our organization, from ENSOE, I think this is not quite possible 100%, because the internal market internal energy market is one of the most significant achievements of European integration by delivering competition and price convergence as much as possible and supply security. I think in order to preserve its role, the market should evolve to address today's challenges, which are the carbonization, affordability, and resilience. And by saying that in a pragmatic way, we think that also timely, massive, and coordinated investments amounting to 863 billion by 2050 are essential. And this is requiring regulatory certainty, political alignment, and effective implementation. Regarding the grid infrastructure as such and system flexibility, because the topic for today is system flexibility, they are strategic enablers. We are not considering them as costs for the carbonized and integrated European energy system. So grid development is a strategic investment and not a cost as such. In order to do it, the regulatory framework must evolve to ensure financing certainty and long-term predictability for TSOs and investors as well. And this includes risk adequate returns and support for the flexibility assets. The regulatory evolution should target long-term predictability and coherence, while tariff reform must deal with affordability, grid efficiency, and cost-reflective pricing. Regarding the affordability, this depends on transparent and cost-reflective and not non-discriminatory tariff structure. Tariff design must encourage efficient grid use. So this is, exactly not the wire solution. This also, the tariffs should encourage the flexibility, the distribution of costs between different users based on objective, transparent, and non-discriminatory criteria. And last but not least, appropriate pricing is related to the main cost drivers for grid use and development. And now, as Europeans, we must unlock and scale up all forms of flexibility, including demand-side response, storage, and digital tools. And all this while enabling the active participation of all consumers. And now we are in a good political momentum because this is aligned through the Clean Industrial Deal and the action plan for affordable energy. And this is leading us, all of us, to execution and delivery, which now are the real challenges. So this is the messages, because you asked to react on the case speaker, are related with investments as such, flexibility and efficient grid use. And further on, if we have enough time, I will develop some pragmatic measures to do it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, Guro, you are next, please.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you very much for the invitation. So my name is Guro Gottfried. I represent Smarten. So SMARTN is the branch association of the flexible demand management industry. Our members provide smart technology to activate flexibility. We are also suppliers and independent aggregators, companies supporting local energy initiatives, and also local flexibility market platforms. So we're a heterogeneous member moth. GNV analyzed the benefits that flexibility can bring to both wholesale markets and system for 2030. And the results of this analysis shows an enormous potential in existing markets, so day ahead, intraday, and so on, through
Udo,
reduced
sorry
price.
to interrupt. It seems there is a problem with the slides. We don't see them anymore. I saw them very quickly, but then they disappeared. So can you maybe try to share again?
I will.
Thank you.
Can you see them now?
Okay, I see something is happening. Yes, I think now they're visible to everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks for telling me. So the results show an enormous potential in the existing markets through both reduced prices and generation costs, and also reduced curtailment of renewable energy. And alongside this, there could be enormous savings also in the balancing markets as well as in grid investment. But this, of course, is only if the flexibility is activated. And this is what we in SMART are trying to do. And I think there's probably not much controversy anymore on the need to harness flexibility to enable electrification and integration of renewables as a reasonable cost. And Flex can allow an affordable energy transition. And still Flex is not allowed to contribute as much as it could. So why is that? So first of all, we need to ensure that flexibility can access all markets. And some important means here are independent aggregation models, deployment of smart meters and DMDs, and also to ensure that aggregators can stack value through smoothly accessing several markets at the same time, maximizing their potential benefits. And also maximizing liquidity in all markets. Now, this applies to the markets that are actually there, because what we observe is that most European system operators do not procure market-based flexibility, that is both TSOs but also DSOs, although they are required to do so through the Clean Energy Package. And as long as the market doesn't exist, we can't access these markets. So first, we need to clarify the responsibility for setting up local flexibility markets. This should be the responsibility of the procuring system operator, better through delegating it to a third party for neutrality reasons. Second, one should not over-incentivize grid investment. I think this was also mentioned by Christos. So on the capex opex question, so you should not make as system operators prefer this traditional solution of grid investment. And last but not least, the European legislation provides system operators with several tools for activating local flex. Several of them were mentioned earlier by other panelists. So you have the local flexibility markets, but you also have flexible connection agreements, and you have cost-reflective tariffs. Different tools, different uses, I would say. However, the two latter, flexible connection agreements and cost-reflective tariffs, appear as free flexibility for the system operator. The system operator does not pay anything for them, so it doesn't impact its OPEX. And this does not mean that this flexibility is for free or costless. It's just that the costs are covered directly by grid users, by the customer that is connected through a flexible connection agreement, or by the other grid users through the tariff, but before the cost reaches the system operator. And we think it's really important to ensure that system operators receive the same incentives for using local flex markets. That is actually the only mechanism that can ensure that the cheapest resource is always dispatched first. This is why we have markets, actually. Now, like ACE's 12 recommendations, several of these points are actually parts of the clean energy package or even earlier legislation. So therefore, if I had to sum up my inputs in just one point, implement the current legislation and also, of course, ensure consistent incentives for the newer parts. Thank you.
Thank you, Guro, also for the final synthesis. It's always very helpful. Thank you for your well-reflected points. Let's move to Lawrence from BEUC, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laurens, and I work in the energy team at the European Consumer Organization. BEUC, we represent 45 national consumer organizations from 32 EU and non-EU European countries to the EU institutions and agencies. And the cryptic acronym comes from our legal name in French, so everybody knows why our acronym doesn't reflect our full name. Our work on energy in totality focuses on bringing affordable, clean energy to European homes. And within that, we work on electricity markets, and within that, we work on flexibility. And to cite Alberto's beginning, I won't be able to give an exhaustive opinion. I'm going to share some reflections of our work on flexibility, which includes both the energy part, the network tariff part, and also the how to enable consumers to adopt the clean technologies aspect. My main message to you today is that we need to look at flexibility in all forms and shapes and take an approach of every little step counts. And why do I say this? Well, we've been working on flexibility since approximately 2017, I'm going to say, back when it was still very much science fiction in terms of consumer policy. Since then, we've moved forward in time. And one of the things that we have noticed is that when we have spoken about flexibility, we tend to have received responses a bit like that just suggest there is a zero-sum game between all household consumers being fully dynamic and totally grid focused, or all households being on a fixed contract. And also in light of what regulators have been doing, such as the ACER, Council of European Energy Regulators Market Monitoring Report, our view is more we need to look at the in-between options, the grain zones. There are never easy solutions to complex measures. And while recognizing that household consumers play a role, we can also not expect everybody to have a electricity grid focus in their daily life, similarly to the fact that we also all cannot be experts on, let's say, chemicals policy, legislation, or any other consumer topic. What have we been doing in recent years? Well, there are some very good examples of how flexibility could work and can work. Specifically, two pieces of research that came out of our UK members, respectively, Which and Citizens Advice. Which researched the consumers' ongoing experience with smart electricity tariffs, and they looked at basically the awareness about the topic all the way through selecting a tariff and deciding to go for one or not. And they find that actually, and this is something we often find with the energy transition, that early adopters tend to be positive. Similarly, less active consumers. So the ones that are maybe not as inclined to be focusing on their energy use or having just other stuff to do in their lives, because we cannot be consumers 24/7. They tended to be influenced by their suppliers. So proactive communications by suppliers about what is demand response, what offers exist out there. And perhaps also unsurprisingly, buying new clean technologies are a way sort of to get the ball rolling. And we also know that word of mouth and the experiences of one person can influence other people's willingness to engage with flexibility. And here, I mean, flexibility really, that can mean different things. Citizens Advice, our other UK member, looked at how this journey in flexibility plays out in terms of consumers with specific needs. So beyond price, so people with specific health needs, neurodiversity, variety of compositions of households, and see what can be done to improve the flexibility experience here. I won't go into details right now, but perhaps unsurprisingly, to a large degree, automation was preferred, simplicity was preferred. And as one consumer mentioned, which I thought was rather interesting, well, why can't I have a sort of try before I buy scheme? Why can't I test out a flexibility offer? And if it doesn't work for me, which is totally fine because perhaps not all consumers need to be flexible, I can switch back to something that does suit my needs. At BEO currently, we are investigating further now more the best practices and worst practices in the EU markets. We're still dealing with 27 EU energy markets. Guru, just before me, mentioned the need to implement, and I agree with that. And we feel that our role is also to share what works in one country, what doesn't work in another country, to also get together through the complexity of energy markets. Because I do want to reiterate that energy markets have always been complex, remain complex. I don't want that to be to say that, oh, therefore we cannot do anything, but we need to work step by step. And that's also why I say every step counts. And I've asked my members, what is the experience with demand response in your country? Do we need something else in terms of consumer protection? Say, for instance, should we have offers with a certain price corridor to take away the risk aspect of it? And our members in general are all optimistic about flexibility, but with differences. Some markets are very, and I think also the Acer map already showed this a little bit. They show, look, consumers have adopted it, they can engage with it, it provides benefits for the grid, for the markets. Others are less in terms of like the full flexibility. And why is that? Sometimes is it that on the existing sort of the pre-flexibility markets, some of my members already experience consumer protection issues. So they are worried about potentially adding new offers onto the market that are or could be, quote unquote, more risky. So these are elements beyond flexibility and beyond what, for instance, the demand side flexibility industry can do that have to be resolved. Finally, as a final point, I don't think there's a reason to reinvent the wheel how to move forward. In 2019, my colleagues who then worked for BEUC on energy policy, they researched existing flexibility and aggregation offers on the market from the perspective of price calculation, so tariffs, rewards, data protection, and contract termination, transparency, and switching. And they have made a nice list of best and worst practices. I'm not going to name the providers because we're now 6 years on, so this is outdated. But what I want to share with you is that we developed a list of do's and don'ts for flexibility offers, both towards suppliers or potential suppliers and towards regulators. And for instance, one important principle is that when a consumer is looking at a tariff, that they get a clear idea from a potential supplier whether something could fit their needs or not. On a non-energy element, I would also say that from a consumer policy perspective, it's not just that flexibility needs to work from an energy market perspective. It also needs to work from a data protection perspective so that your data isn't being sold without your consent to, say, a third party, and the offers should be transparent. So that is to say, we need to go for flexibility in all its forms. All sorts of hybrid tariffs could be very interesting. I hope these also get rolled out across the EU because we still see a huge diversity. We need to cater to different needs, and we as a network, BEUC, hopes to help and work with you all to make this a reality. And of course, we will also keep monitoring the market to check flexibility from the worst practices, the best practices, and everything in between. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to you, Lawrence, and also thanks for bringing the consumer's perspective as well as concerns and really raising these interesting points. We turned out to our last panelist, Dylan McConnell. You have, instead of the 5 minutes, you have maybe 7 because you will also have to guide us a bit through with some introduction about the Australian electricity market on which we are not 100% familiar. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, and hopefully you can hear and see me well enough. Yeah, I'll try to go through this relatively quickly, but it's a bit different to some of the other stuff we've heard. But yeah, so these slides will be made available, I'm told. So please refer back to them afterwards. First of all, I think it's worth putting the size and the geography of Australia in the context of the European Union. We are a very big country, and we are, I guess, further south than where you are. So some of the resource challenges are a little bit different. just a quick overview of our main national electricity market. That's basically just on the eastern seaboard of the country. It's it's one of the longest grids in the world. Serves about 23 million people. I think particularly maybe relevant to the flexibility discussion. We have a 5-minute debt dispatch and settlement market here that was introduced probably 4 years ago now. We used to have half an hour settlement and dispatch, and we've moved to a higher resolution. We have no formal capacity market. We have energy only market. We don't actually have the concept of gate closure either. We basically have continuous trading up until dispatch, and we have 10 ancillary service markets to provide the frequency control and regulation services required. Just on a size level, about 200 terawatt hours. Peak demand about 36 gigawatts, and I think importantly for the or unusually, I guess we have a large amount of distributed solar. About 35% of our residential customers, about 3.5 million households have residential solar. We were historically a very coal-dominated grid. In the last 15 years, we've seen a very rapid sort of growth in variable renewable generation and in particular rooftop solar, which I'll talk about in a second. But I think maybe also interestingly, rooftop solar is quite a bit larger than utility solar in Australia as well. We're about 40% variable renewables at the moment. The solar photovoltaic is certainly one of the dominant technologies that's emerged over the last few years, particularly the small scale as well as the large scale. That's mainly connected. We have a lot of basically less than 15 kilowatt systems on businesses, residents, households connected to the low voltage network that are now significantly impacting the market, which we'll see in a moment. And that's been supported by a range of initiatives that over time, feed-in tariffs, but also consumer sentiment and people just wanting to hedge their own electricity loads. You've probably all seen versions of this. This is a classic duck curve of one of our market regions, South Australia. It's a relatively small region, sort of 14 terawatt hours a year, peak demand, 3.5 gigawatts. It's actually now at the point where we have negative demand in that entire region. So there's periods last year where the aggregate demand due to rooftop solar is now negative from the perspective of how the market operator sees this. This is introducing a whole range of challenges from a market operation perspective. So we actually we have a fairly blunt instrument to try and increase this. But I guess the better way to do this is through having more flexible load and increasing making use of this. This is also reflected in our pricing. This is actually the last 12 months of our market prices in the main market regions. This is in euros as well, and you can see, I think, quite clearly the shape of the impact of solar. But I think also importantly, you can see there's a very significant volatility, particularly compared to I guess most other markets around the world, and also very sharp pricing, which is partly reflective of that 5-minute settlement. And as a consequence of this, we are seeing a huge surge in battery capacity and interest in flexibility at the moment. Understandably, we're seeing spreads in all of the market regions of hundreds of euros per megawatt hour on an annual basis. The other thing that we're seeing quite a lot of now is curtailment. Actually, that reminded me, I think was it Christos mentioned that there was 9% or negative pricing in the European Union. We have regions that have close to 30% periods of time that have negative pricing, and that's now being reflected in significant amounts of curtailment as well. So what are some of the initiatives that we are and I guess challenges we're facing with trying to deal with this. We have a wholesale demand response mechanism, which is essentially a traditional sort of baseline kind of demand response mechanism. Unfortunately, it has not been there has not been much take up. It has been around since 2020s, over 5 years, and to date there has actually only been two formal participants that partake in this mechanism at about 74 megawatts of capacity and a very small amount of dispatch in aggregate. So there's currently a review of this mechanism, and there's sort of directions from our market commission that they may not even proceed with this mechanism, which is a bit of a controversial or at least contested view. On the another sort of aspect of sort of demand side activity is the emergence of aggregators and virtual power plants. Aggregators are technically involved in the wholesale demand response, but they are also involved in just the consumer market as well, so the mass market. So we have sort of essentially what classifies two classes. We have the formal registered VPPs that are participating in central dispatch. And this is relatively small again at the moment. It's sort of an emerging sort of area in the vicinity of, at the moment, 50 odd megawatts, where they're participating in formal dispatch. But we also have a lot of unregistered VPPs, which is essentially retailers being flexible with loads, but as part of managing their portfolios. So, and this is largely solar hot water, and two of our biggest retailers have quite large VPP capacity in this sense. It's about 1.4 gigawatts and 1.1 gigawatts, which is quite significant. But there is a challenge here because they are not formally participating. There is limited visibility on their function and capability, and they're internally optimizing, not necessarily optimizing within the sense of the system. And so we have another sort of emerging initiative. This is relatively new. I think the decision was made to progress this about 6 months ago. This idea of trying to address that issue of this invisible flexible capacity. That this new framework to integrate new resources that can both buy and sell energy. It's too early to tell if how this is going to work, and whether or not voluntary mechanisms may have the same challenges that we've had with the wholesale demand response or the VPPs. But yeah, there's a sort of a new approach that's being explored in Australia too. And I think I've probably already gone over my time, so I'll leave it there.
Right on time, right on time. Thank you so much, Dylan, for this very interesting overview of the Australian electricity market. I think we are ready for the next step in this online debate, which is the polls that we have prepared for our participants and for our panelists to comment on the results. Alberto, please.
Yep, thank you, Laria. And I think interesting perspective from different sides of the sector in different parts of the world. So yes, we have three questions for the audience. The first one relates to the different items in the energy bills of residential, commercial, industrial customers. Clearly, if you want to talk about affordability, you should focus on all of them and see what are the scope for reducing them. But the question is, if you have to pick one, where would you suggest policymakers and regulators to focus in order to increase the affordability and competitiveness of the European economy? Should they focus on generation? Here we are mostly focusing on electricity. Should it focus on generation, transmission, distribution, levies, for example, to cover the cost of renewable support, taxes, or you may even say that you don't have views? Okay, so that is very interesting because we have, we have taxes and we have distribution as the main areas. In the old days, I would have expected most responders to go for generation, but clearly the focus has changed. And I think this is something also that the European Commission has been saying we should be focusing on also beyond generation. So thank you very much. Very interesting feedback. Now we can go to the next poll, please, Chiara. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. So here, where I mentioned different factors. So of the following factors, which in your views could be the most harmful to the increased integration of renewable-based electricity in the power systems in Europe? The limited cross-zonal interconnection capacity. I mentioned already the fact that we are nowhere near the 70% target. The delays in adoptions of terms, conditions, and methodologies for the implementation of electricity sector guidelines. The limited participation of TSOs in European balancing platforms. Barriers still existing for the participation in the market of distribution area resources and demand response and storage. Or you may even, you may not have no use. Right. Well, that's interesting. So, it seems that here there is clearly a clear majority for barriers, and can't say I was expecting it, but I was somehow sensed that this could have come. So the next one is actually on the kind of barriers that you think are the most important. And so in your views, what are the main barriers for the participation of distributed energy resources? Is it a lack of proper legal framework to allow market access? Limited incentives to provide flexibility, including, for example, non-transparent signals, a restrictive requirement for market participation, limited competitive pressure on the retail market, retail price interventions, or you have no views on this? Right. Again, I think we have quite a significant majority in terms of limited incentives to provide flexibility. I think that's very interesting, including non-transparent price signals, which actually is quite reassuring because it should not be too difficult to provide these price signals and get it to final consumers. There is also quite a sizable share thinking that it's the lack of a proper legal framework. So thank you very much. Most interesting feedback. So Ilaria, I think the screen is back to you to try to get the reactions from our guests.
Yes, absolutely. And I look forward to listening to the comments. I would ask our panelists in reverse order to comment, starting therefore from Dylan, and not forgetting that also Christos, of course, you are welcome to comment if you like. So Dylan, how different would have the responses been with an Australian audience?
Look, I have been reflecting on that, how many of the issues are very similar and maybe talked about in slightly different language, but they're very, very similar. That last one that on the lack of incentives is an interesting one. So the question that comes to my mind is why? Because theoretically, or at least from an energy perspective, say there is actually quite a lot of incentive. Like if you're looking at pricing, and so the question is, how is that incentive not being passed through to distributed energy resources? Is that a competition issue, or is that a structural barrier? Now, yeah, we have actually, just talking about non-energy issues, we have some innovative tariff designs for our networks that are trying to drive this sort of behavior. We have something called a solar SOCA tariff that in some of our jurisdictions that it actually gives you basically free network charging during the middle of the day to encourage, this is the network's tariff. That is not necessarily actually passed through to consumers, because that tariff gets passed through to retailers who may, for a whole range of other reasons, find it more complex to pass that on directly to consumers. So the question about whether the incentives are there is a little bit difficult to untangle, I think, from that that question of why they're not there. Like, because theoretically that they are there, it's just that there's a whole lot of other barriers, whether they're competition or even consumer sentiment. That VPPs are somewhat controversial in Australia as well. In theory, there are early adopters that I think Lauren's made a comment about this, that are very active and quite interested in this. Then there's the next tier down that are less engaged, and then there's another tier that actually don't want anyone to touch their equipment or so. Yeah. Anyway, I think I've said enough for now, so I'll pass on to someone else.
Thank you. And let's not forget that, yes, 48% responded about limited incentives, but there's also 26% blaming it to the proper legal framework. But let's see. We take it maybe for a next round. So the next would be then Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Ilaria. I would start with the last one. I think Dylan already mentioned the word untangle. I think sometimes it's difficult to split all these things separately. I should say, as a disclaimer, I'm going to respond as a representative of a consumer organization, while I am aware, of course, from also the other speakers that there are much more elements. I would say that in certain cases, the lack of offer for the consumers is a problem. This is not the case in every country, but in some cases that's a problem. The perennial difficulty of energy markets, while it being something that is not, it's not like a product you buy, it remains an essential service. That will always be a problem, but not an insurmountable one, I think. We also find from our members' research that a lack of awareness about demand-side response plays a role. I mentioned that 10 years ago when Berg started working on it, it was science fiction. And the poor colleague who had to work on this file back then, she got even from most of the other colleagues to comment, demand-side what? I think at least we've moved a bit since then, that the terminology has become a bit more known. I'm going to leave the network tariffs aside, but just to say that also for us, we've been trying to compare and contrast internally network tariffs. It's an incredibly difficult topic. We have used it from a couple of years ago to robustly, check the designs that you're going to implement, but I will not comment on that now because we may comment on that a bit more in depth in the next months. On the second question, if you remember the poll now by heart. Well, the barriers to participation would be my consumer policy response to that, but not disregarding any of the other elements. And then I will immediately go to the first question, and this is a topic that goes much beyond flexibility, and that's the taxes and the levies bit. Again, I don't want to say this is the case in all European countries, but I do know from some of my members that have also expressed this to their national governments, sometimes even together with suppliers, as in the case for Belgium, is that the taxes and levies on electricity are so high that they disincentivize electrification to begin with. And therefore, also from an advice point of view, so consumer organizations, we advise individuals. Of course, we take a long-term market perspective, but at the same time, we also cannot advise people to say, go for a heat pump in a certain country if the tax system works completely against it. This again differs from one country to the next. But if I had to pick one in the first, I think Alberto mentioned you have to pick one. So I would go for taxes and levies, but again, with the disclaimer, this may not be the case again in every single European country, but it's an obvious thing that I've heard not only from my membership network, but even from producers and from other actors in the field. I would leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. And I have to say, Alberto was very smart in framing this question because he put two distinct options, taxes and levies. So combined, they would give 39%. So just to be fully transparent. Okay, thank you so much. And we move to Guro, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll, like Laurence, I'll start at the bottom, I think, on the main barriers of participation. I think, as as has been said previously, to some extent the answers overlap. I think that the restrictive requirements for market participation is clearly a problem, but I'd say it's to a large extent not always a problem in the legal framework, but in the implementation in the legal framework. And I must say, commenting a bit also on the first, especially ACE's presentation, I think it is alarming that many of the means that we point to, all of us point to, as necessary for integrating more flexibility and are already there in the regulation. And I think it's good that we're working on more regulation. I very much welcome the coming network code on demand response. That will also contribute to this. But I think it's very important that we focus on the implementation, because regulation, when it's just written and not implemented, is merely paper, and the only thing the most economic and climate-friendly thing you can do with paper is just not to print it out. I don't think it's up to our ambition level. So yeah, I think really implementing a framework, but also continuing on the legislation. That being said, of course, incentives, both through tariffs, but also through retail prices and through local flex markets, are also necessary, that they together provide a signal to the industry. I mean to the, as far as I'm concerned, the flexible demand management industry, that we can, in our turn, provide to the consumers and help them to react to them through automation and so on. As for the second question, what's the most harmful to increasing integration? Yeah, again, the delays in adoption is for me a clear candidate. But yeah, there are still major barriers for the participation in the markets, both as concerns pre-qualification, such for balancing, the absence of the markets as concerns distribution. They're just not there. And also the implementation of aggregation models. All countries should have a framework for independent aggregation, since Clean Energy Package now 6 years ago, most of member states do not, and that is again alarming. Then for the first question on the different items that compose the energy bill, I must admit I'm very pleased to see that distribution is a well-received candidate. I think this is one of the components that have been thought to increase a lot in the coming years. So focus here is important. It's also a component that traditionally has not been dealt so much with on European level. And I think it's a good thing that we focus more both on tariffs, but also on the flexible connection agreements, and also maybe most of all on the local flexibility markets and how these can work together. So, and I think that all these together would really help the distribution system operators to reduce their costs that come to the consumers.
Great, thank you so much, Guro. George.
Yeah, thank you. I see the three questions as a part of a whole, because yeah, it's divided from the main topic. So from our perspective as system operators, we really think that flexibility is first developing the demand side flexibility. I mean, empowering the consumers to actively participate in energy markets. This is not necessarily incentivizing them. This also means that the proper methodologies and codes should be in place, and we do not have to just have wishful thinking. we are in the midst of network code of on-demand response, elaborating and approving the time frame. So I really think that after the NCDM will be in place and methodologies will follow, the flexibility markets will develop in an accelerated path. And we also should have in mind the expanding of energy storage, because we cannot rely only on consumers on the my side, and all the digital tools and platforms, because of sub point of the question was if the TSOs are participating in the balancing market, European market. Yes, they are, but it's work in progress, and digital tools and platforms are under development and improving. Also, we do not have to forget about the grid capacity and interconnections. It was a long debate here, also here, about this 70%. 70% is not quite a cross-border. It's also about the connects in the system. So it's about the cooperation of DSOs and TSOs and all the market participants. So it's not so simple to see like that. And also, we should unlock the flexibility from renewable sources, especially during the periods of high generation and low demand. So this is a soft measure by ensuring observability and controllability of assets and offering appropriate financial incentives. But we think that now clear roles and responsibilities must be defined between the TSOs, DSOs, and in the activation and the remuneration of all the flexibility services. And because they are here colleagues from the consumer side, we should also take into account the capacity building for both consumers and smaller market participants to ensure the wide participation in the future flexibility schemes. So in brief, we are not yet there still. It's a work in progress. So different opinions are good, but let's wait a little bit until, I mean, maybe mid of next year, when the methodologies and for the new network code and the NCD demand response will be in place, and I think the situation will be much improved. That is our opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Georgi, also for this positive perspective, which always helps. Nicola.
Yes, thanks. Clearly, me representing an industry which is primarily connected at the transmission level, I would have maybe picked other choices. But looking at the results, let me start maybe with the second question. So on the fact that was this outstanding 55% of respondents that were identifying the barriers for market and distributed energy, which I think it's I would say is the element around which I would say the other answers seems to rotate. We're having a large number of installations which are distributed energy producers connected at the distribution level. It makes sense that the two are going hand in hand, also in terms of what is the priority, and also in terms of lack of incentives when it comes to non-transparent price signals. I think it's something which is more redirected towards the retailers than towards the wholesale market, where I think the price formation seems to be quite transparent. The issue is mostly, I would say, there is a moment where we need to think it through in terms of why are we doing all this? Because at the end of the day, we need to secure that we have, let's say, the most optimal solution in terms of cost. And I would say when we go to distribution level, in my past working experience, I've been working with consumers quite a bit, and I'm just wondering, there's a moment when is also the reliability and like changing behaviors. It's not something that is easily done, and it's not something that is always a given. I also seen in my private life a changing behavior of people installing swimming pools to use the excess electricity from PVs to heat up their swimming pools. And I'm not sure that the type of response we want to incentivize. So I think it's also a matter of understanding where do we find the best benefit and where along the value chain we can find it. Being mindful that the more we push towards the final end user, the more we are putting stress on networks that needs to be strengthened, while the more we put this demand flexibility close to the generators, and the more we can optimize the current grids at the time when there is no generation of these variable energy sources. So just a thought in terms of looking at the overall energy system before we try to run for the most fancy solution that could change over time. Thanks.
Thanks to you. Very interesting. Your last point, extremely interesting. So I'm looking to see if Christos would like to comment as well.
It depends a little bit on the amount of questions you have, so I can come in like to make a couple of points if you wish, but if there are questions, I'm also happy
Okay,
to.
let me
At the
take a
moment,
look.
we don't seem to have questions.
Exactly. We don't have questions from the chat. So if
Okay.
you like, you're welcome.
I'm happy to say to top up the previous responses with a couple of points. I mean, the let's say the drawback coming last is that there has been so much said that you could speak for a long time, but I will just make a couple of points. You know, on the first question about which components of the bill, um, you know, what we are seeing, let's say, and what I tried to reflect on earlier is that both the energy and the network components are going to be super important addressing. Perhaps saying a word more on the network side of things, because it also came, you know, quite high in the responses of the audience. I mean, there is an expectation that given the amount of investments we'll have to do on the one network, that this component is going to increase going forward. So let's say containing it in order to contribute towards affordability is going to be essential. I'll come back to that point in a second. Perhaps the other thing, I won't comment on taxes, but perhaps one comment on levies. I think there is also scope there, let's say, in terms of improving the way we design support schemes in order to have the most cost effective type of outcome. So I've done quite a lot of work on, let's say, capacity mechanisms. This was what I was focusing on prior to this role at Acer. And you know, you can see a lot of scope in terms of incentivizing demand response to lower the cost of achieving security of supply, also on how we design things. So I think there is scope across all components. I'm not going to comment on taxes. I think I believe this is a national competency. So I believe it's for governments. Then perhaps coming back to the grid, and also to the point made by Georg, I don't think that anyone doubts, let's say, that there is going to be, again, a significant amount of investments that needs to happen on the grids. But I think the point is more that there are other solutions that can be most cost reflective, and they should be, let's say, fully accessed, fully exploited. And this can be, let's say, using existing networks as much as we can, getting the most juice that we can from the cost that we have invested, from what we have put. But it's also about, let's say, looking for non-wire solutions. And I mean, this can be, you know, all sorts of technologies that help manage the grid. I can think of dynamic line DLR. I can't remember now what the what the initial stand for. But we have seen TSOs implementing that and, let's say, achieving significant cost savings. So this is like the kind of thinking, and perhaps looking at the distribution level. I mean, again, there is very significant scope there to also do more to go beyond the traditional solutions. I also, that's more of a personal view, but I also feel, it can be very difficult to, let's say, from a practical point of view, to invest in distribution networks, digging in big cities. So there is an extra element in terms of bringing the necessary solutions in place in a timely manner. So I think there is a lot of scope there, and perhaps one last work on this. ICER will be publishing some guidelines on distribution and network development plans as stipulated in the legislation. That will focus more on the how to do things in these kind of plans, and how to access, let's say, how to exploit the efficiency first type of principle going forward. And they should come out in a month or so.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Christos, for commenting. We are right on time to wrap up, actually, this very interesting online debate. So I give the floor to Alberto.
Thank you, Larry. A very interesting debate. There is one aspect which I could have added, and clearly, came up by putting together what Nicola said, I think Guru said as well, Lawrence said, George. I mean, clearly, when we're talking about demand response, there is a difference between large consumers. Large consumers are economic agents. Most of them have been involved in some sort of demand response or energy management for many years, because for them it's big money. The largest one are actually connected at the transmission level, which helps the system as a whole, even though the largest part of renewables will be connected in the future at the distribution level. And then we also need to involve smaller consumers. And there, I think there is I hinted at it in my introduction. I didn't put a question on this. There is a behavioral, and there is a confidence, and there is a trustworthiness issue here. Consumers, I have the impression that consumers in general see the energy sector, the electricity, a bit like a black hole. I mean, they've been hit by high prices. They think that these high prices, most of them think the high prices come from somebody making money out of it. And when approached by someone offering something, they are very cautious. I think, maybe the experience is that it justifies that. I think some data suggests that most consumers, when they switch for a worse tariff. So I would expect that either they do not understand, or they are tricked into worse tariffs. So I think there is an element there, because we can solve all the technical issues, we can give them incentives, we can try to remove the barriers, but unless we engage consumers and get consumers, into this sector and convince them that they can play a role, and there is a value to be made, I think will be always an uphill struggle. So maybe another debate in the future will be with a lot of psychologists and behavioral economists, etc., to try to solve this one. I think this is not for engineers, economists, or whatever. This is really to go into the minds of people and try to see how we can turn a sector which is currently, I think, honestly, at the moment is perceived as a bit of a gray area, into something that people are happy to get into. Maybe we missed an opportunity in the past, but maybe not everything is lost. So anyway, Hilary, before I give the screen back to you, I would like to thank you as a host and then all our contributors, Christos and Nicola, George, Guru, Lawrence, and Dylan. And last but not least, Tomiris, who's been instrumental in preparing this event, and then Chiara, who's made it happen. So, Ilaria, back to you.
Well, I can just say that in the chat we have really great support on your latest statements, which is very good, involving also more perspectives, because why not? Social sciences may contribute to see more people uploading. So yes, I think today's debate was excellent to provide the general picture, and I'm sure we will keep talking about this in the future. So I can only join your thank yous to our fantastic speakers and panelists, to all the registered participants. We had a good attendance, so we can be happy. And to the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.